All right, man, we're back this week, and a topic kind of came across my desk, if you will. As we continue on this path of growth and learning and defining success for ourselves, like how often do you listen to podcasts or you go to a conference and you learn something, and then you don't take any action on it? You're like, oh, I'm all fired up. I'm gonna do that. I'm all 24 hours later, you're excited about it, and then you don't take action, and then 48 hours later, it just is gone. It's a blip. You don't even remember it. And so I've done this a lot of times, and then intentionally have learned something new, and it sparked my interest. And I think when you recognize a good opportunity, it sparks your interest, it creates ideas and motivation, but action and execution is really what is going to drive the goals forward. So the gap between learning and doing, I think, is a good topic. And how often do people try to learn and they really are, genuine about that, but then they don't do anything about it, or they don't go all in. They just kind of half-ass it and like, it's a little hard. I'm not going to do it anymore. So I thought we'd share some stories, kind of talk about the knowledge gap, or the gap between knowledge and execution, and just have a conversation about it. What do you think?
I think it's great. We kind of teed it up in the last episode and talking about the smaller the amount of time in between gaining new information and changing your behavior, aka taking action, is a measurement of IQ. And to answer your initial question, how many times? So many times. With the amount of information I love to consume, it doesn't matter. And it'll almost, when I started out on this journey, just started consuming everything. You almost become a junkie, an improvement junkie, and then certain dots will connect randomly. But that only helps a little bit when your recall is situational. There's some benefit there. But to your point, we don't have an information problem these days. We have everything at our fingertips. We have an action problem and an execution problem. So we're going to talk through kind of some of the why behind that, and ways that you can take really small chunks to start implementing some of the stuff we're relaying to you out the gate.
Yeah. And I think it's just, there's all sorts of reasons why you don't take action. I think the biggest one is fear, in multiple facets: fear of not being successful, or fear of being too successful.
100%.
Right? Like you're almost like, oh my gosh, if this actually works and my life changes and my dreams come true, and like, well, then now I gotta do this. I gotta be in front of more people, or I gotta, am I going to lose time with my family because now I'm being pulled in too many directions, or you don't know how to deal with maybe the excess financial outcomes of that success, or whatever, right? You have a lot more bigger decisions potentially. Or it's the fear of, just being like a failure and just afraid that you're not going to be able to succeed. And then you kind of lose some confidence. But I think that you're right. There is an abundant amount of information out there. You're always going to be able to learn. You're always going to be able to find things to do. And, I think another reason why you don't take action is you're just constantly researching, and you're constantly learning, and you're constantly picking things up, and it's paralysis by analysis. And you're like, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then you're like, oh, no, wait. There's another word or something in there that I don't remember. I'm not sure I know all of it. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. So I need to do some more research, or just like starting a business. Like, you're not going to know how to do it. Just like getting married or having a kid. You don't know no one gives you a manual for this stuff. Like, you just do it. Right. And so, I think the paralysis by analysis is another big one, is you're constantly trying to figure out, I need all the answers before I even start.
Yeah. It's artificial progress too. Like, you feel so good because you are gaining knowledge, but in your brain, it feels like, oh, I'm doing this good thing. I have this in my head. That's progress. When really it hasn't gone out into the world, or it hasn't become material in the action form and what you're trying to achieve. But inside you're like, oh, that's progress. It doesn't really work that way. And that's kind of back to the dopamine, like these ideas of what we can be and the things that we want. They're all safe in our head because it's art of the possible. I've got plenty of time. But when we don't take action on it, we put it to tomorrow and the next week.
Yeah.
We all know how fast time goes. And I think that's one of the bigger problems is in our head. It's like, we that illusion of getting better is there, but we have nothing to show for it, which can kind of be self-defeating at the same time.
Well, yeah. And you're like, all right. So I think if we're, I think people listening to this podcast are probably thinking or starting to think about what does the rest of my life look like? Mm-hmm. And you're learning these new things and you got all these ideas and you got these dreams and you got the things that you want to accomplish, or maybe you're already currently accomplishing them. But I think this episode is a little bit more to the people who have not started what they want to achieve yet. And they're on the fence because they're still a little nervous about it or whatever. Or maybe that this is going to be the thing. So I've got some time. Like, I know it's going to be the thing and I'll get to it. Like, I know that this is the business I'm going to start. So I've got like another 4 or 5 years and then I'll start it. Well, what happens when you do start it and you're like, oh shit, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And you could have figured that out 5 or 10 years ago, as opposed to waiting because you've already made it up in your mind. This is what it's going to be. I think there's a lot of that is you have to take that action to figure out if it's truly what you want. The magic happens from that is it just opens the door for more opportunity because now you've opened your mind up to learning new things and actually pivoting through experience. And then you can pivot this way. And so the path is never straight, but you got to keep going forward. And if you're just content on an even keel and not challenging yourself and not doing it as you learn these things, you waste that time a little bit.
And even if you're not content, because I would challenge anyone who says that they're content, even comfortable. I think oftentimes it's just the devil we know is preferable to the devil we don't. And so you'd rather suffer in this current state that's not really what you want because you know it. And that's back to the comfort crisis of, even though it's technically uncomfortable and you're in pain and suffering because you're not reaching for what you really want, you're suffering because you're not willing to just shake yourself out of that in little consistent ways.
Yeah.
That fear, which everything comes down to fear, and the lack of taking risk is what is keeping you unfulfilled in a certain sense. I know that I was there and I still get there some days if I start plateauing and stop pushing it or the consistency stalls. That's when I'm the most miserable.
100%. I've spoken with some people who have had that level of success younger and they're like, well, dude, like, what do I need to keep growing and learning? And I was like, I've kind of made, like, I'm happy. I made it. Like, I'm content. Like, okay, yeah, but you're like 42 years old. You've got another 40, 50, 60 years. What are you going to do to maintain it? Like, you have to continue growth and learning and all that in order to maintain that happiness and joy. Like, you're not going to, okay, that's great now, but your life is going to be is your life the same now as it was 20 years ago? It's going to be completely different 20 years from now too. So, but back to the point of like, when you learn these new things and it brings you all this excitement, and you get that feeling and it's like you see the opportunity in front of you. There's this, philosophy or whatever you want to call it, but it's basically like the rule of immediate implementation. It's like go within 24 hours, take action on that thing that you just got excited about. And then you can find out 24 hours later, like, maybe not. That wasn't it. But if you don't take that action, you're just prolonging finding out what's possible. For example, you might do some research and you're going to, let's say starting a business or whatever. Like, let's use SuccessFlow for an example. Mm-hmm. So that's something totally brand new. When it piqued my interest of like building something and having a speaking engagement or starting a podcast, whatever, is from that conference from a couple years ago. And it all started with get on social media more and get out in front of people, even if your videos suck, even if you hate the sound of your voice or what you look like, or you don't know what to say, like just hit record and put it out. I did that for like 2 years, right? We had the storybook. We still got the podcast going on, obviously. And I put myself out there for a long period of time and I took action on it immediately. It completely changed my life. It was like a pivotal moment of how much I learned and I found out what was possible. Now I'm not doing all of that as much anymore because I've changed, alignments have changed and opportunities have changed and kind of what I'm working on. But had I not done that, I would have just stayed the course and probably not been as happy or joyful as I am now because I didn't know, all the things that we accomplished last year wouldn't have happened had I not done that. You know what I mean? So
absolutely,
it's like you come out of a conference or something and you learn something new and you're there for a reason. You're there to be a sponge and just take 1 or 2 nuggets from that and just immediately 24 hours later, just boom, go for it. And just make it happen and find out what you're capable of.
And I think this also stems back to how are you recording what you're consuming too? Obviously, you're not going to have a notebook on hand at all times while you're consuming, maybe driving, walking, etc. But as you are consuming, listening to for what are the action items I'm going to take so that you have something to reference and plug it into your calendar, something to keep in mind. This is where the reflection and intention point of the day is super important. Because you're going through, okay, new information in, what am I going to try to work into my day when the opportunity arises? And at the end of the day, what did I apply? Sounds like more work, but this is where the magic happens. This is where you're grooving new areas of your brain into your subconscious, your reticular activating system of what am I changing? What am I looking to change? And how am I doing on it?
Yeah. 5 steps into this immediate implementation rule. Basically, once you learn something new and it aligns and you can see it, it's an opportunity. You're like, okay, within the first 5 seconds, step 1 is a 5-second rule. Write it down. Who do you need to contact?
There we go.
What's the tip? What's the thing? Whatever that you need to do, right? So like when I was at that conference, record a video, like just write it down. Social media, just make an effort, like write it down. Step 2 is set a 24-hour action goal. So you've got to do something about that, whatever you wrote down within the next 24 hours. So every time you consume new knowledge, set a little micro goal of I need to accomplish this within 24 hours. And the risk is like if you wait longer, you almost forget, like it's out of sight, out of mind, like you forget about it and then you just don't take action. Like it's a passing thought. It's a passing opportunity. Like we mentioned before, where those buses are opportunities and you're at the bus stop and how many of those are you going to let pass by without jumping on the bus? So within 24 hours, take the action. Step 3 is the 1 action rule. Don't do a bunch of things. Just do the one thing that's going to help you stay on course. So like for me, in that example was record video, post on social media. That was it. I wasn't writing. I wasn't recording podcasts or trying to come up with a brand new business idea. It was just focused on that. Right. And then the step 4 is make it public or accountable. So find an accountability partner or share in one of those videos in that example. It's like, hey guys, I'm going to be on here every day. I'm going to post something and you're going to learn something or whatever. So have an accountability partner or self-accountability. And then step 5 is turn it into a habit. Now, we all know habits are formed when you do something consistently over, what do they say, 21 days or whatever. So when you build these 5-second rule to 24 hours to now you're starting to do things and then you start building these routines and you develop it maybe in your morning routine and then you start developing these habits and then it just becomes who you are. And then now you got an identity shift. And then it's just like, okay, I just took something that I learned from this little piece of whatever I was. And because I took those action steps immediately, I have now been able to achieve and open more doors for further opportunity of growth and success or whatever it is I'm trying to achieve. So that's the 5 steps of the immediate implementation rule. Apply within 5 seconds, start immediately, set a 24-hour action goal, use the 1 action rule. Don't do too many things. Just take 1 action, write it down, do that, and then make it public, find an accountability partner, and then turn it into a habit.
I love it. And as you're talking through this, something that's real time for myself and my whole team as we are selling enterprise platform software, and we're totally changing how we're going about it. Has the software changed? Well, yes, we're constantly updating the platform. The value prop hasn't changed, but we've realized there is more there than we thought. So we are reapproaching how we run every diagnostic discovery process and the demonstration associated with that. So how we're navigating through this and the things that we're talking about has totally changed. Yeah. And so even though we've been doing this for myself going on 13 years, it is a totally different paradigm shift because the previous habits, and we've reiterated a number of times, but this one's very substantial with what we're trying to do. I've had to break it down and put in with each customer facing meeting, this is what I'm doing differently, and then get accountability from the other team members that are on the call. We're never doing these in a silo. Did we hit all the points that we were trying to frame up this demonstration? And then post demonstration, did we hit on all the points that we did to tell the story that we're trying to tell? This has had to be immediate action taken because we're trying to hit with such urgency how we're selling the platform. And you only have so many meetings to do this, right? To make it land. So this is top of mind for me as we're having to change very quickly on a dime this year in my professional career as a team unit.
Well, and you get that feedback. Like you get that collaborative, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Or someone's going to call you out. That's where that accountability piece is like, hey, we're not touching on that because I think this prospective client, this is how they feel about this situation. So hitting this point will serve you better. And it's similar to sports. It's like a head coach and you always see, especially younger guys as, they're developing in the game, whether it's basketball, football, baseball, whatever it is, or gals, they come off the bench, coach will call timeout or whatever, and they'll come off the bench And maybe just talk to that one player, be like, hey, here's some feedback. Like this is, I need, and you see them moving their hands and pointing out, and they're like, if you're over here on the wing and we're passing the ball to the opposite side of the court and you see an opportunity to cut back door and hang out, like, and get that pass right there wide open underneath the basket, like, and they're pointing out these things and they're giving immediate feedback. And then that player, next time that ball swings to the other side of the wing, immediately implements that knowledge they just got, and now you scored a bucket, right? And so you see that in sports a lot. Otherwise, usually the player is not going to be on the team long, or at least not on the court long, if they're not taking immediate action on what they just learned from the coach to implement a new play or awareness of the game.
Well, that's the thing, right? When we talk about whether it's sports or the corporate arena, again, the speed of changing your action based on knowledge, a performance review is a knowledge, a mistake made or an opportunity missed is knowledge. You being able to show that in a similar situation or the same situation, you took a different action based on the feedback is the key to not only making progress, but it being visible to those that you're supporting that you've adjusted it and are growing as well. And that's what we're talking about, growth. It's that heat-seeking missile. We're constantly trying to, as we're defining success for ourselves in the micro and the macro, what are those micro adjustments? And this is exactly what we're talking about. It's the speed of being able to course correct.
Yeah, and it's those micros. It's the habit stacking. It's like if I make this little change here and then I add this little change. So if I'm used to doing it this way and it's the correct way, but I want to get a little bit better. So then now I'll add a new habit. So every time I do this, I do this. And then I get that dialed in. So now I've got both. And it's like every time I add another, I do this, and then I do this, right? So like I wake up at 5:30. That's it. That's my only habit. All I'm doing in the mornings, I'm waking up at 5:30. Nothing else matters. I'm just waking up at 5:30. You do that for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden, okay, now when I wake up at 5:30, I'm going to drink 32 ounces of water and I'm going to sit in quiet space and, clear my head. So now I'm now waking up at 5:30, and then now I'm drinking 32 ounces of water and sitting in quiet space and doing whatever. Then you do that for a couple of weeks, and then you stack on another habit. Well, now I'm getting outside, I'm going on a walk, and now you've just built yourself a morning routine over time. And so that's where you're taking these little things that you learn, you apply immediate action. It's not necessarily, again, action on all things. Like you're not going to be able to go from, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 and I'm going to do this overnight. Habit stacking is going to be your friend. Like just start slow, man. Like just take the action and then add more to it as you go along. And then eventually a year or two later, you're going to look back and you're like, holy crap, I'm a totally different person.
I couldn't agree more. And as you're kind of going through that, I think this applies so directly to our relationships at home as well, home or close relationships, but specifically thinking about your actions and the feedback and information you get from your partner or your kids. Once you get that information, and because we all know how we can get into our habits, that opportunity is probably going to present itself again, and how quickly we are able to adjust based on what we know, either upset or took the household in the wrong direction based on what we're trying to build. How quickly did we change our behavior there? Oh, I remember when the dishes were put away this way, that this was not, the household wasn't that good.
Right. This was the result. I got a little slap on the wrist, maybe.
How quickly do I change my behavior and actually do it the way that we agreed upon? And maybe one way, maybe there's some deliberation that needs to occur, but this happens in relationships as well too. And that's when you're constantly trying to improve and remove the friction, which is what we're doing again. So there's not a lot of time in between us correcting the lack of alignment in our household. This applies across the board is what I'm getting
It does. I'm really glad you brought that up because, in any relationship, it doesn't succeed without communication. And with communication is how you learn from each other. It's the knowledge that you gain from each other and what each person needs in order to be successful or whatever. And you learn certain tendencies and habits and things of the other person in the household. And, you do it the wrong way and you might get, a little doghouse action. Maybe you sleep on the couch that night or whatever happens in your world.
We talked about this before. That's when things,
don't you remember? And half the time I'm like, I really don't. I'm sorry. It's like, okay, well, tell me again. I promise I got it.
And then sometimes when you actually take the adjusted proper action, it's like a big surprise.
Right.
Wow, you listen. we're making progress. And then that's reinforcing.
Yeah, when everyone's on the same page, things just move smoother. They flow. Exactly. Yeah. So I think this is a good topic. I know there's a lot of examples out there. We talk about Buffett a lot, and some of these, these people, these wealthy individuals, some of the top 1% or whatever, they don't get there by sitting around. And whether, I don't know, that's probably not everyone's goals. I think that comes with its own set of problems, and that could be for another podcast when you have, uber success and how the dark side of that. And that's probably not what most people are seeking. But I think that there's definitely a lot of things you can learn from these people that you look up to that are, at the top of, in terms of what are their habits? What do they look at when they find an opportunity? Do they jump at it, or do they wait? Do they spend a lot of time researching and researching, or do they just act and then figure it out along the way? And so I think it's important to pick up some of these philosophies, and when you read about these things, like, just try it. Like, if you learn something new, or someone shares some new knowledge with you, and it kind of gets you excited, like, just go for it. Just take the leap. Just make the jump. Sign up for that thing. Sign up for that class, or say yes to that coffee meeting, or whatever. Like, just take the small action, focus on your health, focus on the relationships, and see what you can do, in the next 6 months, right? And just continue to start now.
I think it's so good. The information's cheap, execution's everything. And this is going to be kind of a part 2 that you set up for us as topics. I think that what can happen when there's maybe too much action or too much
saying yes to
decision
too many things,
making on one plate. And we're going to take a look at the other side of that and kind of talk about the balance in between. So tune in next week. Let us know what type of guests and topics you're looking for. We've got a few of those in, and it's helpful as we're putting these together.